All right, start of a new week here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Hope you had a great weekend. It's good to be back talking with you again. It was a nice quiet weekend for Pitt. I mean, at least on the Pitt basketball front. There was definitely a lot of Pitt wrestling going on. There was Pitt gymnastics on Friday, wrestling Friday and Saturday. Pitt women's basketball got a win yesterday. Lots of things happening on that front. In terms of the Pitt men's basketball team, which we've all been paying a lot of attention to this, over the past couple of months, there was nothing happening. But it's good to be back here for another Morning Pitt video that we do every day, Monday through Friday, here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Put that subscribe button right down there in the lower right-hand corner. You can see it. I'm sort of looking at it. Click that button. You can turn on notifications, get an alert sent to your phone every time we post a new video or we go live for our weekly live show on Wednesday nights or a post-game show, whatever it may be. You don't want to miss any of that. So click subscribe and turn on the notifications. If you don't want to get an alert, that's fine too. Just click the subscribe button because we like it. And let's be honest, it's the age of the internet and content creation. We're all addicted to the numbers. So boost the numbers, like this video, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And there was no Pitt basketball game. Pitt men's basketball team did not play this past weekend, like I said. But that doesn't mean there wasn't any basketball to watch. And it was an interesting sort of phenomenon that emerged on Saturday. And I wasn't the only one to notice it. People were talking about it on the message boards and different. I saw Pitt fans on social media commenting on it, and it was kind of funny to see that even though Pitt was off, Pitt fans were watching a lot of college basketball. They were keeping up on a lot of what was going on in the world of college basketball because there were things happening during the day that were relevant to Pitt. There was a thread on our message board. Let me check it right now and see how far along it was. There was a thread on our premium center court at the Pete message board called, what was it? ACC Saturday game thread with more than 150, 160 replies. People just posting about Saturday basketball games throughout the ACC. Now, the ACC had a lot of games on Saturday. I was just looking at the schedule this past Saturday. Yeah, there were 7 games. Pitt was the only team that was off. And so Pitt fans were interested in keeping up on what was happening in those games because Virginia Tech mattered for Pitt. Miami-Clemson mattered for Pitt. The results of these games are starting to matter for Pitt. With 8 games left to play in the regular season for Pitt left to play, some of these teams only have 7 games left to play, there's actually a lot at stake. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to keep an eye on. And there's impact from these other games. So when Virginia Tech beat Virginia, that meant something for Pitt, just like when Miami beat Clemson, because those were the 2 teams ahead of Pitt in the standings in the ACC. And when those 2 teams lose, it obviously helps Pitt. Now, I mean, you start getting into net rankings and, what boosts. Well, Pitt beat Virginia. Would it be better for Virginia to win? Well, no. A win at Virginia Tech, how much is that going to help Virginia and boost their net rankings, this and that? Listen, I've almost given up paying attention to those rankings. I'll keep an eye on the weekly rankings, the AP poll, and the net rankings, how they move up and move down. But it's a curiosity at best because the simple truth of the matter for this Pitt basketball team as they finish out this regular season and move into the postseason is just keep winning. Those things just are inconsequential. The blowout losses they had early in the season with West Virginia and Michigan, plus the loss they had against Florida State, those things are going to come back and haunt them, and the computers are going to hate them for it. And the fact that they've had a lot of really close wins, that they're getting out with 1-point wins and 3-point wins and 2-point wins, the computers are going to hold that against them. So just keep winning. All right, your margin of victory and what happened to you in some of those games earlier in the season, they're going to hurt you in the computer ranks. And you can't really control that now. But what you can do is keep winning. And that's kind of what matters the most, is that number in the win column. And that's what Pitt's got an opportunity to continue building on. And, when you start to see results like Virginia Tech beats Virginia, or Clemson loses, because Clemson was at the top of the heap, and now Clemson's lost 2 games in a row. They don't look like they're that far ahead of anybody anymore. When they lose to Boston College, there's no shame in losing to Miami, although it's a home game. You should be able to hold serve on your home court. But Miami's good, so there's not a lot of shame in losing to Miami. But if you're going to be the top team in the ACC, you got to win your home games, even if it is against one of the better teams in the conference. Miami now 9-4 after beating the Tigers. But when you see that happen, when Virginia loses, when Clemson loses, you start seeing that door crack a little bit wider open. That door being the path to the ACC regular season championship. And even as recently as a week ago, I was still sort of holding off. Even after they beat Miami, I was still... And I'm not going to say that the North Carolina win pushed me over the top and believing that it could happen or believing it was a conversation that we should be having. But as these teams keep losing, and there was something like 18 ranked teams lost in the last week, everybody seems vulnerable across the country. And certainly in the ACC, everybody seems vulnerable. No one has less than 3 losses at this point. And there's 3 teams with 3 losses. Everybody else has 4 or more. And there's really only 3 4-loss teams. So out of a 15-team conference, 9 have 5 losses or more. 8 have 6 losses or more. I mean, it's very spread out. And if you want to take that to mean the ACC is down, or you want to take it to mean the ACC has a lot of parity, or you want to take it to mean that the best teams in the ACC have not yet emerged, which might actually be the reality of this. This is a whole other conversation to have, a whole other discussion to have. But as we keep going back and forth about whether the ACC is down or whether the league just has a lot of parity, I think you have teams that are sort of getting it together as the season goes on. I mean, I think Pitt is certainly an example of that. Duke looks like they're figuring it out. I think Carolina is going to continue to be a dangerous team as they continue to grow together. Teams can figure it out. So a team like Clemson that looks flawed, and you sort of wondered if the wheels were going to fall off a little bit for the Tigers. They're able to jump out to this early lead in the conference. What do they get to? 10-1. Meanwhile, some of these other teams are starting to surge a little bit, and Clemson is starting to show some cracks. And so maybe that's the case, that we're going to see some of these teams, some of the cream is going to start rising to the top over the final 4 weeks or so of this regular season. But however you want to put it, and however you want to look at it, and however you want to describe this conference this year, it's more and more increasingly difficult to have a discussion about what could happen and about who can emerge as the regular season champion without talking about Pitt. Can Pitt win the regular season championship? Could we be looking at an ACC championship team? And I mean, there's no need to bury the lead. I mean, I think you probably have the same thought I do, that absolutely yes. Yes, they can. I mean, they've shown it, they've played 12 games now. I think you're well past the point, and I keep saying this, that, I think you're past the point of a small sample size. You're certainly past the midpoint of the ACC schedule. And they've come out of 12 games with a 9-3 record with wins over Virginia, Miami, North Carolina twice. They beat Syracuse. You look down, right now, there are 9 teams. Right? There are 9 teams that have a winning record in conference play in the ACC right now. And that goes all the way from Clemson at 10-3 down to Wake Forest and Syracuse at 7-6. Pitt lost to Clemson, but they beat Virginia. They beat NC State. They beat Miami. They lost to Duke. They beat Carolina twice. They beat Wake Forest, and they beat Syracuse. 2 losses out of, 9 games? 7-2 record against the 9 teams or the other 8 teams with winning records in the conference right now. They've played most of the top teams in the conference, and they've beaten most of the top teams in the conference, with just 2 notable exceptions and then one real dog loss in the Florida State game. But as we consider the question of can they win the ACC regular season championship, can they move forward and actually pull this off, I mean, it's important to look at not necessarily or not just what they've already done to get to this point, but the path that lies ahead. Because that might have the real answer of whether they can do this. And not just their path, but the rest of the conference, the rest of these teams in the top section. And to a large extent, they are sort of bunched up. Clemson's 10-3, Syracuse and Wake are 7-6. I mean, that's the separation between first place and ninth place is basically 3 games, which when you've still got 7 or 8 games left to play is a margin that can be closed. So you don't want to say anything is locked away. I mean, I don't think Pitt is going to go 0-8 over the final 8 games of the regular season to finish 9-11, but there's still a lot of games left to play, right? And for all of these teams. And so you don't want to get too far down the road of saying, well, this team's in it, this team's out of it. But I think if you just look at the 9 teams that have winning records right now, right? I mean, those are probably your ACC regular season champion is going to come from one of those 9 teams. It's probably one of like about 6 or one of about 5 teams, but let's just say these 9 teams. If you look at these 9 teams, I don't think there's any question that Pitt's got the easiest schedule out of 9. And I'm stretching out to include 9 teams here, and that I think have at least a shot at the ACC regular season title. And Pitt clearly has the easiest schedule. Louisville tomorrow night, you know that. Then they're at Florida State, Boston College at home, at Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech at home, Syracuse, at Notre Dame, at Miami. Out of those 8 games, there are only 2 teams that have winning records in conference play. It's Syracuse, who they already beat, and Miami, who they already beat. Now, going to Miami is going to be tough. They barely got past Miami at home. That's going to be a tough one. And then they have Syracuse at home after they took a 20-point lead on the Orange in the Dome. Feels like a long, long time ago. The other 6 games, all teams with losing records right now in conference play. Louisville, who they crushed before. Florida State, admittedly, they lost to Florida State. So you can't count that was an automatic, win. Obviously it's going to be a challenge, particularly being on the road. But Florida State also played out of their minds and couldn't miss the basket that night. I still like Pitt's chances. Boston College, they should win. At Virginia Tech, tough. That's going to be a tougher game than maybe the records would indicate. Certainly after Virginia Tech beat Virginia. And I think there's been a feeling about Virginia Tech all season that they're better than their record shows. But still, if you're going to make a run at the ACC regular season title, it's a game you have to win. Georgia Tech at home after they beat Georgia Tech on the road. And then the other game against a team with a losing record in conference play is Notre Dame. At Notre Dame in the penultimate game of the regular season. Only 2 teams with winning records. Nobody else has a schedule like that. Clemson's got to face 4 teams out of their final 7. They have 7 more games. 4 of those 7 are against teams with winning records in the conference. Carolina, Syracuse, NC State, Virginia, with 3 of those 4 on the road. Clemson is going to lose a handful more games. Maybe, at least 2, probably 2, maybe even 3. Virginia's got 8 more games, just like Pitt. Half of those games are against teams with winning records in conference play. NC State, Duke, at Carolina, and Clemson. NC State, they're 9-4, Pitt's 9-3, so they're right behind them. 7 games left to play. 6 out of those 7 games are against teams with winning records in the conference. NC State has to play at Virginia. They have to play at Syracuse. They have to play Carolina. They have to play Wake. They have to play Clemson. They have to play at Duke. NC State is 9-4 right now. But what are they going to be after they get through that stretch? And it's Virginia and then Boston College and then 5 teams in a row that currently have winning records in the conference. Miami, 4 out of their final 7 opponents have winning records in the conference. Duke, 5 out of their final 8 opponents have winning records in the conference. Carolina, 6 out of 8. They have 8 more teams to play. 6 of them have winning records in the conference. They go to Wake, they have Clemson, Miami, at NC State. And then they have Virginia, and then they close the season against Duke at home. Which, Duke and Carolina, one of them has to lose that game, right? Wake Forest, 4 out of their final 7 games are against teams with winning records. And Syracuse, 5 out of their final 7 are against teams with winning records in conference play. Now, a lot of these are, teams within this group of 9 facing each other, obviously. When we're talking about playing, and so somebody's going to emerge with a win, somebody's going to emerge with a loss. But I think when you look at the strength of the schedule, the caliber of opponents, the quality of opponents, what they've achieved so far this season, Pitt's schedule is as forgiving as it gets. Now, there's the cautionary tale of the Florida State game that's always going to linger out there, particularly when they have to go to Tallahassee. When's that game? On Saturday. There's always going to be that cautionary tale of, okay, that's great that all these teams have losing records, but they could lose to any of them at any time. And that's true. They could. They're not good enough to overlook anyone. They're not good enough to assume a victory against anyone. And they're not good enough to think that they're just going to steamroll or just win by showing up. I mean, partially that's just because it's college basketball and, you have to, nobody wins just by showing up for the most part. I mean, certainly not this season. But also this Pitt team has flaws. There's no question about it. If they go into a cold slump shooting-wise, they can eventually shoot themselves out of it, but sometimes it might be too late, or that cold slump might come at a crucial point in the game. They get out-rebounded. Yeah, I mean, like they're rebounding is a problem. Offensive rebound, allowing offensive rebounds is a problem, and it can be a problem for this team against teams that do well there, and it can hurt them. I mean, they have their vulnerabilities. Their defense, I think Jeff Capel said it well when he said their initial defense is usually pretty good, but it's off those offensive rebounds or baskets in transition where their defense sometimes breaks down, which, I mean, you can draw all the connections there. Bad shots lead to baskets in transition and lead to defensive breakdowns. Failing to grab defensive rebounds allows the other team to get second chance opportunities, and your defense doesn't really get set, and you end up getting beat defensively. So, I mean, that all kind of pieces together. But when they're on, and for the most part, they've been on more than they've been off. When they're on, they're an incredibly difficult team to beat. Incredibly difficult. And they've shown that. And they've shown that through the course of 23 regular season games. They've shown that through the course of 12 ACC games. The fact that you can have Jamarius Burton, well, let's set him aside. You can have Nelly Cummings step up like he did at North Carolina. You can have Blake Hinson play like he did against Miami. You can get Nike Sabandi coming off the bench like he was doing earlier in the ACC schedule. You can get Greg Elliott to pop off for 3 or 4 or 5 3-pointers on any given night. And you're always going to have Jamarius Burton just being Jamarius Burton, which is the absolute essential piece of this team. Even when he doesn't play well, or we would say he didn't have his best game, he still scores 19 and makes the 2 free throws to win the game. In this one game after he makes, ends 4 consecutive Miami possessions to end the game. I mean, he is, everything for this team. And as long as he's out there, he's going to be going. He's going to be on point and scoring and playing well. And then you just need whoever it's going to be that night to step up alongside him. Whether it's Cummings or it's Hinson or it's Elliott or it's Sabandi. One of those guys is going to have a good night. And if by some chance 2 of those guys have a good night, in addition to Burton, you're cooked. You're cooked. You're not going to win. I mean, it's really, I think, Pitt's win probability is like 95 or 97% if Hinson and Cummings are hitting shots. I mean, you don't have a shot. You don't have a chance. And so, you take sort of this team's basic fundamental makeup, you put it on this schedule that they have coming up here, and you say, these guys can absolutely make a run. They've got the most favorable schedule of any team in their position right now, and they seem to have the pieces put together to really kind of string together some wins. Should be interesting. Should be an interesting month of February. We've had interesting months of February around here in the past few years, but they haven't always been good. This one has a chance to be good. This one has a chance to be really good. We'll see. We'll see what they can do. We've got a long week here of Pitt basketball, Pitt football, and Pitt recruiting to talk about. Certainly, we're going to have a lot to talk about as we move through this week. Pitt against Louisville tomorrow night at the Peterson Event Center at 7 o'clock. We'll get you ready for that game on tomorrow's Morning Pitt and recap it on Wednesday's Morning Pitt. Of course, we'll get into some football and recruiting topics as well, as we always do here when we get together every morning, Monday through Friday on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. You can talk to other Pitt fans all day, every day on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate that more than I can say. Hope you had a great weekend. I hope you have a great Monday coming up. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.